It started the way most mistakes do. Quietly, almost invisibly. My wife had this friend, Sophie. They met in college and had stayed close, even after we got married. She was always around, helping with party decorations, staying late to clean up, bringing over coffee for my wife on rough mornings. I barely noticed her at first. I noticed she was pretty, but not in a way that ever made me pause. That changed recently. Not all at once, but in fragments. A certain laugh. The way she'd look at me when no one else was paying attention. I started catching her watching me, just for a second longer than normal. She didn't look away in embarrassment. She held it. I brushed it off the first few times. Maybe she was just a warm person. Some people are like that, friendly, touchy, generous with attention. But then she started asking questions. Personal ones. Do you ever feel like you're living someone else's version of your life? Or, when's the last time you did something just for yourself? They weren't casual questions. They were invitations. And I answered them fully, honestly. More honestly than I'd answered anyone in a long time. She laughed at my bad jokes, the kind my wife barely heard anymore. When I said something sarcastic, Sophie didn't just chuckle, she leaned forward, touched my arm and said, "God, you're so dry." I love that. It was small, harmless on the surface. But when you haven't felt seen in a while, that kind of thing hits you deep. She came over one evening while my wife was working late. Just dropped by, unannounced, said she had extra Thai food. We sat and ate in the kitchen, and she told me a story about her last failed relationship. It wasn't the story that got me, it was the look in her eyes when she said, "I think I'm done trying to find someone who gets me." The silence after that was loud. She didn't break eye contact. I shifted in my seat, tried to laugh it off, said something like, "Well, maybe he didn't deserve to get you." She smiled, but it was a knowing kind of smile. One that said she heard something deeper in what I'd said. I started thinking about her after she left. Not in a fantasy way, just replaying the evening. Her laugh, her voice, how easy everything felt. That was the dangerous part. Ease. The way she made me feel like I wasn't invisible. Like maybe I still had some version of myself worth paying attention to. I told myself it was nothing. Just a friend. But deep down, something had already shifted. Not in what I did, but in what I wanted. And wanting. That's where everything dangerous begins. My wife had been working longer hours. Most nights she'd come home drained, go straight to the bedroom, and fall asleep without much of a word. I didn't blame her. Life gets heavy, but the silence between us had started to stretch. We barely touched anymore. No fights, no drama, just distance. That's what made Sophie feel different. She filled that quiet in a way I didn't expect. She noticed things, complimented my cooking, asked about the little details of my day. She once said, "You really take care of people. That's rare." I didn't know how much I needed to hear something like that until she said it. One night she called just to talk. Said she couldn't sleep. Her voice was soft, slowed by whatever was going on in her head. I listened for over an hour. Didn't even look at the time. That became a thing. To call, to answer. Sometimes we didn't talk about anything important. But those conversations felt more real than most things in my life. One time she said, "You make me feel safe. Like I don't have to filter myself." I should have seen that for what it was. But part of me wanted to believe it was innocent. It wasn't. The next week, my wife had to travel for work. Sophie offered to bring dinner over. Said it was weird eating alone and figured I felt the same. I didn't say no. We ate and talked like usual, and at one point she asked, "Are you happy?" Just like that. No warning. I stumbled through some vague answer, but I knew she wasn't looking for details. She already knew the truth. She just wanted to hear me say it. After dinner we kept talking. About nothing. About everything. The energy in the room felt different. Her knees touched mine and neither of us moved. I remember thinking this is where the line is. We hadn't crossed it. Not technically. But my heart was already leaning forward. I couldn't deny it anymore. I liked how she made me feel. I liked who I was around her. More alive, more awake, more wanted. I knew it was wrong, but I also knew I wouldn't stop talking to her. Not yet. There was a moment where she looked at me, lips slightly parted like she was about to speak, but didn't. Her eyes lingered, full of something unspoken. I didn't ask what it was. I just let the silence hold it. And even though nothing physical had happened, we both knew something real had. I went to bed that night with her voice still echoing in my head, wondering how we got here, and why part of me didn't want to go back. It was after another dinner, one of those nights that felt too easy, too comfortable. Sophie stayed later than usual. She was wiping down the counter while I dried the dishes. We weren't saying much, but the silence didn't feel empty. It felt loaded. I could feel her watching me. When I turned to meet her gaze, she didn't look away. Her eyes stayed on mine, soft and steady, like she was daring me to see her, really see her. I remember thinking if I kiss her now, she won't stop me. I did. It wasn't wild or rushed. It was slow, deliberate, like we'd both imagined it 100 times but didn't want to admit it. And when I pulled back, she didn't apologize. She didn't even look surprised. She just whispered, "We shouldn't," and I agreed. But neither of us moved. The air between us was thick with everything we didn't say. We didn't sleep together that night. But the line had been crossed, and we both knew it. The next day I couldn't think straight. I kept replaying the kiss, the way she looked at me afterward. I told myself it was just a moment, a lapse in judgment, that I'd let it go. But I didn't. Couldn't. She sent a voice message that night. Just a soft, "I can't stop thinking about you," followed by silence. Not even a goodbye. I listened to it twice before deleting it, but the sound of her voice stayed in my head like a song you can't shake. That was all the permission I needed. 2 nights later we met again. No plans, no discussion, just instinct. We didn't talk much. Everything that needed to be said was in the way she pulled me in, the way my hands found her without hesitation. It wasn't frantic or desperate. It was quiet, intense, like we'd both been holding our breath for weeks. When it was over, neither of us said what came next. There was no plan, no promises. Just this strange mix of guilt and relief, like scratching an itch you're not supposed to have. I drove home in silence. My wedding ring felt heavier than usual. I told myself it was a mistake, that I loved my wife, that this wasn't who I was. But none of that erased what happened. And deep down I didn't want it erased. That's the part that scared me most. Not the act itself, but how much I wanted it. How right it felt, even though everything about it was wrong. I crossed the line, fully and without excuse. And once you cross it, there's no pretending it didn't happen. She knew. Before I said a word, before anything slipped, my wife already knew. It was in the way she looked at me. Blank, cold, like someone seeing a stranger in familiar clothes. She didn't yell, didn't cry. Just asked me once, calmly, if there was someone else. I nodded. That was it. No drama. No breakdown. Just silence that hit harder than any screaming ever could. She packed a bag that night and stayed at her sister's. The house felt different without her. Too clean, too still. I kept thinking maybe I'd wake up and undo it somehow. But the truth had already cracked everything open. Sophie didn't text, didn't call, just disappeared. No long talk, no what now? No trying to build something from the wreckage. Whatever we were, whatever we thought we could be, died the second reality stepped in. It wasn't love. It was escape. A moment where 2 people couldn't stand who they were anymore and tried to find pieces of themselves in each other. That kind of connection never lasts. It burns too fast, too bright, and then leaves nothing behind but ash and guilt. I still see my wife sometimes, at a distance, the store, and mutual friends' gatherings. She's polite, guarded. The kind of politeness that hurts more than cruelty. She deserves better. I know that now. Maybe I always did, but I wanted something selfish and I took it. There's no fixing that. You don't unring a bell. You just learn to live with the echo. There are nights when I think about Sophie. Not what we did, but how she looked at me before it happened. Like I was wanted. Like I mattered. I don't know if she meant it. Maybe it was just part of the moment, part of the fantasy we both clung to. But that look, it stays with me. Haunts me in the quiet moments when I wish I had made a different choice. I passed a coffee shop last week and saw a woman who looked like her. For a second, my heart jumped. I almost walked in. But it wasn't her. Of course it wasn't. She's gone. Not just from my life, but from that version of myself I became around her. That man doesn't exist anymore. I buried him with the lie he told himself, that it wasn't cheating if it felt like something real. The truth is, a woman who's deeply attracted to you doesn't always say it out loud. She shows it. In stolen glances, lingering words, moments that stretch longer than they should. And if you're lonely enough, empty enough, you'll read those signals as answers instead of warnings. That's what I did. And I lost everything that mattered because of it.